I used to believe that my marriage was unshakable. Helen and I had been together for 10 years. 10 years of trust, comfort, and shared memories. We weren't perfect, but we had built a life that felt solid. At least that's what I thought. Lately, though, something had changed. It was subtle at first, little things that I brushed off as nothing. She started coming home later than usual, blaming it on work. Her phone, once left carelessly on the kitchen counter, was now always face down or tucked into her bag. She used to be open about her day, telling me everything from office gossip to what she had for lunch, but now our conversations had become shallow. When I asked how work was, she'd just say, "Fine," and change the subject. I told myself not to overthink it. People change, routines shift. Maybe she was just stressed, but the feeling gnawed at me, an unease creeping into the corners of my mind. One evening, she came home wearing perfume, one I didn't recognize. I smiled and asked, "New scent?" She hesitated for just a fraction of a second before nodding. "Yeah, a coworker recommended it," she said casually, setting her bag down. I wanted to believe her. I really did. But why did she hesitate? Why did she suddenly start going to the gym more often? Helen had never been the fitness type. She tried different routines before, yoga, running, even swimming, but nothing ever stuck. Then, a few months ago, she became obsessed with the gym. She said it helped her clear her mind, made her feel better. At first, I encouraged her. I even joined her for a while. But at some point, I noticed that she preferred going alone. "It's just my me time," she had said with a laugh when I mentioned it. "Besides, you don't like evening workouts." True, I usually worked out in the mornings before work, but something about the way she said it made me uneasy. I started paying closer attention. The way she dressed changed. Tighter leggings, crop tops that she never would have worn before. She spent more time looking at herself in the mirror, adjusting her hair. I told myself I was being paranoid. It was normal for someone to take care of themselves, right? Maybe she was just feeling more confident. But then there were the texts. She used to leave her phone on the table while we watched TV, casually replying to messages from friends or work. Now, whenever she got a notification, she would tilt the screen away from me. She'd smile at the screen, type quickly, and lock the phone before I could catch a glimpse. I wasn't the jealous type. I had never doubted Helen before, but something deep in my gut told me that my wife was hiding something, and I was about to find out what. I tried to convince myself that I was imagining things, that I was reading too much into small changes. But doubts have a way of creeping into your mind, twisting themselves around your thoughts until they're impossible to ignore. Helen and I had always been close. She was my best friend, my partner in everything. We had built a life together, shared dreams, laughed at the same stupid jokes for years. But lately, it felt like I was living with a stranger. I started paying attention to details I had once ignored. Her gym sessions had become longer. At first, she used to go for an hour, maybe an hour and a half. Now, some nights, she was gone for 3 hours. When I asked, she shrugged it off. "Cardio, then weights, then a little sauna," she said one night as she kicked off her sneakers. Time just flies. That made sense. It did. But something didn't sit right with me. It wasn't just the gym. She had started dressing differently, sexier, more form-fitting clothes, even when we weren't going out. I noticed how she carefully chose her outfits before leaving the house, something she never used to do for a simple gym session. One night, when she was in the shower, I saw her gym bag sitting by the couch. My heart pounded as I reached for it. I wasn't the kind of husband who snooped, but the doubt was eating me alive. Inside, I found her water bottle, a towel, some resistance bands. Nothing unusual. But then my fingers brushed against something soft at the bottom of the bag. Lingerie, a delicate, lace-trimmed bra that I had never seen before. My stomach twisted into a knot. I could still hear the water running in the bathroom. My hands felt shaky as I put everything back exactly as I had found it. My mind raced. Why would she take lingerie to the gym? Maybe I was wrong. Maybe there was some explanation. I had to know for sure. The next day, I told Helen I had to stay late at work. Instead, I parked my car a few blocks from the gym and waited. I felt ridiculous sitting there in the dark, watching the entrance like some jealous stalker. This was my wife, the woman I loved. What was I expecting to find? But then I saw her. Helen walked out of the gym, her hair loose, her body glowing as if she had just showered. But she wasn't alone. A man walked beside her, tall, muscular, with an easy confidence in his stride. I recognized him immediately. Jake, her personal trainer. I had seen him before when I used to go to the gym with her. He was always friendly, always helpful. But now, seeing them together outside, the way she laughed at something he said, the way he touched her arm casually, possessively, something inside me snapped. I watched as they walked to the parking lot. Helen looked around briefly before getting into his car. I felt like I was going to be sick. I could have followed them. I could have confronted them right then and there. But I couldn't move. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. This was real. My wife was cheating on me. Doubt is a strange thing. It starts as a whisper, a nagging little thought that you push aside. But then it grows. It spreads through your mind like cracks in glass, until one day, everything shatters. For me, the doubt started as small changes in Helen's routine. Little things that didn't make sense on their own, but together they formed a pattern I couldn't ignore. Her work hours had always been predictable. For years, she came home at the same time every day, sometimes a little late if she had a meeting. But lately, she had been staying out longer. She blamed it on the gym. "I just lose track of time," she'd say with a laugh, kicking off her sneakers when she got home. "You know how it is." I did know how it was. I used to go to the gym with her back when she first started. But at some point, she preferred going alone. "I like my space when I work out," she told me one night when I suggested joining her again. That was fine. I understood wanting personal space. But then I started noticing other things. Her gym sessions got longer. At first, she'd be gone for an hour, maybe an hour and a half. Then it stretched to 2 hours. Then 3. Cardio, then weights, then a little sauna, she explained one evening when she got home particularly late. Time just flies. It made sense. But why did it feel like a lie? Then there were the text messages. Helen had never been secretive about her phone before. She used to leave it on the kitchen counter, answering texts absent-mindedly while we talked about our day. But now her phone was always face down. Whenever it buzzed, she'd glance at it quickly, then put it away. One night, while we were watching a movie, her phone lit up with a notification. She grabbed it almost instantly and turned the screen away from me. "Work email," she said, too casually. Work emails didn't make her smile like that. I started paying more attention. I didn't want to be the paranoid husband, but something was wrong. I could feel it. One evening, she came home later than usual. Her hair was damp, as if she had just showered. She smelled different. Not like the usual mix of sweat and deodorant after the gym, but fresh, with a faint hint of perfume. "You showered at the gym?" I asked, trying to sound casual. "Yeah," she said, kicking off her shoes. Felt gross. She had never done that before. I told myself not to overthink it. People change their habits. But then, something happened that I couldn't ignore. One night, she left her gym bag by the couch. She was in the shower, and her phone was charging in the bedroom. I sat there, staring at the bag, my pulse pounding. I wasn't the type to snoop, but doubt had been eating away at me for weeks. Before I could talk myself out of it, I reached for the bag. Inside, I found the usual things: her water bottle, a towel, resistance bands. But as I dug deeper, my fingers brushed against something soft. Lace. I pulled it out and stared at it. A delicate black lace bra. Not the sports bras she usually wore to the gym. Not the comfortable, practical kind she had worn for years. This was different. This was the kind of lingerie a woman wears for someone else. My hands felt cold. My stomach twisted. I could hear the water running in the bathroom. I put the bra back exactly as I found it and zipped the bag shut. I sat there, my mind racing. There had to be an explanation. Maybe she had bought it for me. Maybe she had forgotten it in her bag. Maybe... No, I already knew the truth. I just wasn't ready to face it. The next day, I decided I couldn't ignore it anymore. That evening, I told Helen I had to stay late at work. Instead, I drove to her gym and parked a few blocks away. I felt ridiculous, like some jealous, insecure fool. I kept telling myself I was overreacting, that I'd see her walk out alone, just like always. But when she finally came out, she wasn't alone. Jake, her personal trainer, was with her. Tall, muscular, confident. I had seen him before. I remembered how he smiled at Helen when I used to go with her. How he always seemed a little too friendly. Helen laughed at something he said. Then she looked around, checking her surroundings. And then, she got into his car. I gripped the steering wheel, my knuckles turning white. I could have followed them. I could have confronted them right then and there. But I couldn't move. Couldn't breathe. This was it. This was the moment everything changed. My wife was cheating on me, and I had the proof. I don't remember driving home that night. I must have, because I woke up in my own bed the next morning. My body aching from tension. My mind clouded with exhaustion. But the night before was a blur. All I could see when I closed my eyes was Helen's smile as she slipped into Jake's car. The way she glanced around before getting in, as if she knew she was doing something wrong. I had spent hours lying awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment of our marriage in my head. Was this the first time? Had it been going on for months? Years? The worst part was that I still wanted to believe there was some explanation. That maybe I was wrong. But deep down, I knew I wasn't. That day at work, I was useless. My hands trembled as I tried to type, my mind refusing to focus. Every email, every conversation felt distant, like I was watching my life from behind a glass wall. My coworkers noticed something was off, but no one asked. At lunch, I stepped outside and called my best friend, Ryan.
Hey, man.
What's up? He answered, chewing on something. I took a deep breath, my throat dry. I think Helen's cheating on me. Silence. The chewing stopped. What? I swallowed. Last night, I told her I had to work late. Instead, I waited outside her gym. I saw her leave with her trainer. She got into his car. Shit, Ryan muttered. Did you follow them? No, I admitted. I just froze. He exhaled. All right, listen. You need proof. If you accuse her now, she might just lie her way out of it. You said she got into his car. Did they kiss? Did you see anything physical? I hesitated.
No.
Then she'll deny it. She'll say they're just friends. That I'm paranoid. I clenched my jaw. He was right. If I confronted Helen now, she'd have an excuse ready. I needed something undeniable. I needed evidence. The investigation begins. That night, I acted normal. Forced myself to eat dinner with her, to nod at the right times as she talked about her day. She smiled, kissed my cheek, told me she was going to bed early. Lying came so easily to her. Once she was asleep, I took her phone. We had always known each other's passcodes. She never had a reason to hide anything before. My hands shook as I unlocked the screen. I went straight to her messages. Nothing. Not a single text from Jake. In fact, no messages at all that seemed suspicious. I checked her call log. No calls to or from him. I frowned. Either she was careful or she was using another method to talk to him. Then I had an idea. I opened her Google Maps history. I scrolled past the usual locations, our home, her office, the gym. But then I saw it. An unfamiliar address. A residential building across town. She had been there multiple times over the last few weeks. My stomach dropped. I copied the address into my own phone and put hers back exactly where I found it. Then I lay beside her in bed, staring at the ceiling, my pulse hammering in my ears. Tomorrow I would follow her, and I would finally know the truth revealed. The next evening, I left work early and parked near the address I had found. My hands were sweating as I gripped the steering wheel, waiting. At 7:45 p.m., Helen's car pulled up. She parked, got out, and walked toward the building entrance. She wasn't dressed for the gym. Tight jeans, fitted blouse, her hair styled perfectly. She looked beautiful, She looked like she was meeting someone special. My heart pounded as I watched her punch in a code at the entrance and disappear inside. I forced myself to wait. 5 minutes. 10. 15. Then I got out of my car. The building had a security guard at the front desk. I walked up, pretending to check my phone. "Excuse me," I said casually. "I'm supposed to meet a friend here, but I forgot his apartment number. A guy named Jake. Do you know which unit he's in?" The guard barely glanced at me. "Oh yeah, the gym trainer, right? He's on the 5th floor. 5B. I nodded, forcing a smile. "Thanks." I stepped back outside, my stomach churning. I had my answer. Helen wasn't working out late at the gym. She wasn't busy with work. She was here, with him. I could leave. I could go home and wait for her to return. Pretend I didn't know. But I couldn't. Not this time. I walked back inside. The elevator ride to the 5th floor felt like an eternity. Every muscle in my body was tense. My fists clenched so hard my nails dug into my palms. When I reached apartment 5B, I stood outside the door, breathing heavily. Then I knocked. Silence. I knocked again, harder this time. Footsteps. Then the door cracked open. Jake stood there, shirtless. His hair was messy, his skin damp with sweat. Behind him, I saw Helen. She was sitting on the couch, wearing one of his shirts. Her legs were bare. Her face turned white when she saw me. "Alex," she whispered. Something inside me shattered. Jake looked between us, his expression smug, as if he had won some kind of prize. I exhaled sharply. "How long?" Helen swallowed, her hands shaking. "Alex, please." "How long?" She hesitated. Then, so quietly I almost didn't hear it, she said, "6 months." I nodded slowly. 6 months of lies. 6 months of pretending. 6 months of letting me believe we still had a marriage. Jake smirked. "Look, man." Punched him. I don't even remember doing it. 1 second I was standing there. The next, my fist connected with his jaw, and he stumbled back, knocking over a lamp. Helen screamed. "Alex, stop." But I didn't hit him again. He wasn't worth it. I turned to Helen. She was crying now, her hands covering her mouth. I took a deep breath. My chest felt hollow, empty. "I'll send you the divorce papers," I said, my voice cold. Then I walked away, leaving her and her lover behind. I didn't go home that night. After leaving Helen and Jake in that apartment, I got into my car and just drove. I didn't have a destination in mind. I just needed to get away. My hands were still shaking from the adrenaline, my knuckles sore from punching him. The reality of what had just happened felt distant, like I was watching someone else's life unravel. But the pain in my chest was real. The kind of pain that doesn't fade with time. It carves itself into your bones. Eventually, I found myself parked outside Ryan's house. I wasn't sure how I had ended up there, but I was grateful when he opened the door, took one look at my face, and didn't ask questions. "Come in," he said. I stepped inside, and before I could stop myself, I told him everything. Every word felt like ripping open a wound, exposing the raw, bleeding mess inside me. Ryan listened, his expression darkening with every detail. When I finished, he let out a long breath. "She's a piece of shit," he said simply. I let out a humorless laugh. "Yeah." We sat in silence for a while. Finally, he asked, "What's your next move?" I exhaled. "Divorce." It was the only option. There was nothing left to salvage. Ryan nodded. "Good. But listen, man. She's gonna come crawling back." I frowned. "What makes you so sure?" "Because cheaters always do. She's been living in a fantasy world where she gets to have both. Her stable husband and her little gym fling. Now that you caught her, reality is going to hit her hard." I hadn't thought about that. At that moment, I didn't care what Helen would do next. I just wanted out. That night, I crashed on Ryan's couch. It was the first time in a long time that I slept without Helen beside me. And I realized something terrifying. I didn't miss her. The next morning, I woke up feeling numb. The previous night's events came rushing back as soon as I opened my eyes. For a few seconds, I lay there, staring at the ceiling, trying to process everything. Then my phone buzzed. Helen. I stared at her name on the screen, my pulse quickening. I didn't want to talk to her. Not yet. Maybe not ever. She called again. And again. By the fourth missed call, she texted, "Alex, please. Just talk to me." I turned off my phone. Ryan walked in, a mug of coffee in his hand. "She calling?" I nodded. "She's panicking," he said with a smirk. Good. But I didn't feel good. I just felt tired. I knew I had to get things in motion. I called a divorce lawyer later that morning. He listened patiently as I explained everything. Then he asked, "Do you have any proof of the affair?" I thought about the Google Maps history, the texts, and the fact that I had literally caught them together. "Yeah," I said. "I have proof." "Good," the lawyer said. "That'll make things easier." We scheduled a meeting for later that week. And just like that, my marriage was officially over. Helen shows up. That evening, I decided to go home. I didn't want to, but I couldn't avoid it forever. I needed clothes, documents, things I had left behind in my rush to leave. When I pulled into the driveway, Helen's car was there. I sighed. Of course. I stepped out, bracing myself. She must have been waiting because the moment I unlocked the front door, she was there. Her eyes were red, swollen. She had been crying. "Alex," she breathed. "Can we talk?" I didn't answer. I walked past her, heading to the bedroom. She followed. "Please," she whispered. "Just let me explain." I tossed an empty suitcase onto the bed and started throwing clothes into it. "Explain what, Helen?" My voice was flat, emotionless. "Explain how you've been sleeping with Jake for 6 months? Or how you've been lying to my face every day?" She flinched. "I never wanted to hurt you." I laughed bitterly. "Yeah? Well, you did." She stepped closer, reaching for my hand. Pulled away. "I made a mistake," she said, her voice breaking. "I got caught up in something I shouldn't have. But I love you, Alex. I never stopped loving you." I turned to her, finally meeting her eyes. "If you loved me," I said quietly, "you wouldn't have done this." She started crying again. "I was stupid, okay? I was selfish. But I swear to you it didn't mean anything. It was just a distraction." I shook my head. "A distraction from what?" She hesitated. From feeling like we were just roommates." I froze. "Alex," she whispered. "We stopped being a couple a long time ago. We were just going through the motions. And I know that's my fault too, but I felt invisible. Jake. He made me feel wanted." I clenched my jaw. "So instead of talking to me, you went and screwed someone else?" She nodded, tears streaming down her face. For a moment, I just stood there, staring at the woman I had spent 10 years of my life with. I wanted to feel something. Anger, sadness, regret. But all I felt was emptiness. "I can't fix this, Helen," I said finally. "And I don't want to." She shook her head. "Please don't do this. We can go to therapy, we can—" "No." I cut her off. "We can't." She broke down completely, sobbing into her hands. I zipped up my suitcase and walked past her without another word. The end of us. I spent the next few nights at Ryan's place, finalizing everything with the lawyer. Helen continued to call, continued to text, but I ignored her. Then, one evening, I got a text from an unknown number. "Jake, you didn't have to hit me, man. Let's be civil about this." I stared at the screen in disbelief. Ryan, who was sitting next to me, read the message over my shoulder and burst out laughing. "Unbelievable," he said. "The guy screws your wife and thinks he can lecture you on civility?" I smirked. I should have hit him harder. I blocked his number. A week later, Helen finally stopped calling. The divorce process had officially begun. And for the first time in months, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Relief. I should have been done with it. I should have walked away and let karma do its work. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized Helen and Jake didn't deserve to get away so easily. Helen had betrayed me, lied to me, let me believe I was the problem while she snuck around with that smug bastard. And Jake? He strutted around like he was untouchable, like he had won some kind of prize. No, they needed to feel what I felt, and I knew exactly how to do it. The setup. I started with Helen. She thought she still had a chance. Even after I filed for divorce, she kept calling, kept texting, trying to get me to talk. One night, she sent a message that made me pause. Helen, I know I hurt you, but please don't tell anyone about this. It's private. I don't want people judging me for one mistake. One mistake. 6 months of cheating wasn't one mistake. I knew then that she hadn't told anyone the truth. Her family, her friends. They all probably thought we were separating because we had grown apart. She was protecting herself. I decided it was time to change that. Exposing Helen. Helen's parents had always liked me. Her mother especially. We weren't best friends, but I had a good relationship with them. So I made a call. Hey, Mrs. Thompson, I said, keeping my voice steady. I just wanted to let you know that Helen and I are divorcing. There was a pause. Oh, Alex, I'm so sorry. She told us you were having problems, but we thought you'd work through them. I clenched my jaw. Did she tell you why we're divorcing? No. She said it was mutual. I let out a breath. It wasn't. I caught her cheating. Silence. Then a sharp inhale. She what? She was having an affair with her gym trainer. I walked in on them together. Mrs. Thompson started crying. I felt a twinge of guilt, but it passed quickly. By the time I hung up, I knew the damage was done. Helen had been hiding behind a lie, and now it was gone. Her family knew. It wouldn't be long before all her friends did too. She wanted to protect her image. I made sure she couldn't, ruining Jake's life. Helen wasn't the only one who needed payback. Jake had been sleeping with a married woman for months. He had no respect for relationships, and I knew I wasn't the first husband he had humiliated. So I did some digging. I found out that the gym where he worked had a strict no fraternization policy. Trainers weren't allowed to have relationships with clients, especially married ones. I sent an anonymous email to the gym's management. Attached were screenshots of Helen's Google Maps history, showing all the visits to Jake's apartment. I didn't include the confrontation video. No need to get myself into legal trouble, but I made it clear Jake had been sleeping with a married client, violating gym policy. 2 days later, Ryan called me, laughing so hard he could barely speak. Dude, he gasped. Jake got fired. I grinned.
No shit. Yeah, man.
Someone snitched. I played dumb. Wow, that's crazy. Jake losing his job wasn't enough, though. I wanted him to feel the same helplessness I had felt. So I took it a step further. I found out that Jake had been dating another woman while sleeping with Helen. A girl named Stephanie. She had been posting about him on Instagram for months, clearly thinking they were exclusive. I created a fake account, sent her a message. Me, hey, I don't know you, but I thought you should see this. I attached screenshots of Helen's texts to Jake and a picture of the two of them outside his apartment. She saw the message instantly, and within 10 minutes, she posted a story. Stephanie, when you find out your boyfriend has been screwing a married woman for 6 months, enjoy unemployment. Asshole. Jake's life was falling apart, and it felt good. Helen comes crawling back. After her family found out, Helen started texting me even more. Helen, Alex, please, can we talk? Helen, I'm so sorry. I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but I can't lose you. Helen, I love you. I was stupid, but I love you. Love? She had 6 months to love me. Instead, she had chosen to love him. I ignored her messages. Then one night, there was a knock at my door. I opened it to find Helen standing there, her eyes red and swollen. She had been crying. Alex, she whispered. Please. I crossed my arms. What do you want? She took a shaky breath. I know I screwed up. I was selfish and I hurt you, and I don't expect you to forgive me. But I miss you. I miss us. I stayed silent. I made a mistake, she continued. Jake, he never cared about me. I was just convenient. I scoffed. And you're realizing that now? She nodded. I thought he was different. But I was wrong. I was so wrong. I shook my head. You made your choice, Helen. Her lip trembled. I know, and I regret it. But, do you really not love me anymore? I looked at her for a long moment. Did I love her? Maybe I had once. But the woman I had loved was gone. She had been replaced by someone else. Someone who had betrayed me, lied to me, humiliated me. No, I didn't love her anymore. I deserve better, I said simply. A single tear rolled down her cheek. Goodbye, Helen. I closed the door. And just like that, she was out of my life. For good. The night I closed the door on Helen, I expected to feel something. Anger, sadness, maybe even regret. Instead, I felt nothing. Just a strange emptiness. Like a room stripped of furniture. She was gone, and so was the life we had built together. But it didn't feel like a loss. It felt like a chapter closing. A weight lifting off my chest. I went back inside and sat on the couch, staring at the walls. My apartment felt foreign, as if I were seeing it for the first time. It wasn't really mine anymore. Every corner of it had memories of her. The picture frames we had picked out together. The couch where we had watched movies, her legs curled under her. The scent of her perfume still faint in the air. I stood up abruptly. I needed to change this. I needed to take my life back. The next morning, I called a moving company and arranged for a storage unit. Over the next few days, I went through every room, every drawer, boxing up anything that reminded me of her. The framed wedding photo in the hallway, gone. The coffee mugs she loved, gone. The stupid decorative pillows she insisted we needed, gone. By the time I was done, the apartment felt different. Still empty, but in a good way. A fresh start. I threw myself into work. I had been on autopilot for weeks, barely functioning. But now, I was more focused than ever. I took on extra projects, stayed late at the office, did anything to keep my mind occupied. The more I immersed myself in work, the less I thought about Helen. Ryan insisted I start going out more. You need to get back out there, he said one night over beers. Meet new people. Have fun. The idea of dating again felt ridiculous, but I agreed to go out with him and a few friends. That first night out was awkward as hell. I wasn't ready, and it showed. I wasn't used to flirting, to making small talk with strangers. But as the weeks went on, it got easier. I started to enjoy myself again. I laughed more. I drank more. I even danced, something I hadn't done in years. Then, one night, I met Emily. She was nothing like Helen. Where Helen had been calculating, always careful with her words, Emily was spontaneous and unfiltered. She laughed loudly, spoke her mind, and had a way of making everything feel effortless. We met at a bar through mutual friends, and from the moment we started talking, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Excitement. We talked for hours that night, about books, music, travel, everything except relationships. She didn't ask about my past, and I didn't ask about hers. It was a relief, just being in the moment with no baggage hanging over us. By the end of the night, she gave me her number. Call me, she said with a smirk, if you ever get tired of looking so serious all the time. I laughed. For the first time in months, it wasn't forced. Over the next few weeks, we started seeing each other. Slowly, carefully. I was honest with her. I told her I had just come out of a marriage, that I wasn't sure what I was looking for. She just shrugged. Then don't look for anything. Just see where it goes. So I did. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like myself again. One evening, months later, I ran into Helen. It was in a grocery store of all places, near the frozen food aisle. She looked different, tired, thinner. She hesitated when she saw me, then gave a weak smile. Hey, Alex. I nodded. Helen. There was an awkward silence. Then, she blurted out, You look good. Thanks, I said simply. Her eyes searched mine. Are you happy? I considered her question. Once, I had thought happiness meant having her by my side. But now, standing there, I realized that I was happier without her. I had a new life, new people who mattered to me. Helen was just a memory now, a lesson learned. Yeah, I said finally. I am. She nodded slowly, as if absorbing the truth of it. Then she gave me a sad little smile. "Take care, Alex. You too." And just like that, she walked away. No apologies, no pleas to come back. Just two people who had once shared a life, now strangers again. I watched her go, then turned back to my cart, reaching for a pint of ice cream. I didn't think about Helen again that night, or the next, because I had finally moved on. Time moved on, and so did I. At first, I measured time by how many nights I went without thinking about Helen. Then, by how many mornings I woke up feeling normal. Eventually, weeks passed where she didn't even cross my mind. It was strange how something that once consumed me had become just another scar, visible if I looked closely, but no longer painful. Work was going better than ever. With all the extra hours I had put in, I was finally offered the promotion I had been aiming for. My boss called me into his office one Friday and shook my hand. "You've been killing it, Alex. This is well deserved." I thanked him, but in the back of my mind, I couldn't help but think, this was what I should have been celebrating with Helen. Instead, I went out that night with Ryan and some coworkers, raising a toast to myself. And then there was Emily. What started as something casual had turned into something more. I don't know when it happened exactly, but one day, I realized I was looking forward to seeing her in a way that felt different. We spent weekends together, exploring the city, trying new restaurants, taking spontaneous road trips. She had a way of making the simplest things feel exciting. One night, we were walking along the river, the city lights reflecting off the water. She stopped and looked at me, her expression unreadable. "You ever think about the future?" she asked. I hesitated. "What do you mean?" She kicked a rock into the water, watching the ripples. "I mean, do you see yourself getting married again someday? Having a family?" The question caught me off guard. For a long time, I had convinced myself that marriage was something I never wanted again. But standing there with Emily, I wasn't so sure. "I don't know," I admitted. "I used to think I did. Then I thought I never would. Now, I guess I'm figuring it out." She nodded, as if that answer was good enough. Then she grinned. "Well, if you ever figure it out, let me know." I laughed, but the thought stayed with me long after we went home. A few weeks later, I ran into someone I never expected to see again. Jake. I was at a coffee shop, waiting for my order, when I heard a familiar voice behind me. "Hey, buddy." I turned around, and there he was. He looked different, less confident, a little rough around the edges. I almost didn't recognize him without that smug grin. I didn't say anything, just stared at him, waiting. He shifted uncomfortably. "Look, man, I know I screwed up. With Helen, with you. I was an asshole. I just wanted to say, I'm sorry." I raised an eyebrow. "You're sorry?" He nodded. "Yeah, I lost my job, lost Helen, and, well, I deserved it. I was a piece of shit." I studied him for a moment. The old me might have wanted to punch him again, might have wanted to tell him to go to hell, but now I just felt nothing. "Good," I said finally. He blinked. "What?" "You deserved it," I repeated, "and now you get to live with it." I picked up my coffee and walked away, leaving him standing there. As I stepped outside, the cold air hit my face, and I smiled. Because for the first time in a long time, I realized I wasn't angry anymore. I had won, and I had a new life ahead of me. For the first time in a long time, I was truly happy. Not the kind of happiness that comes from distractions or temporary highs, but the quiet, steady kind. The kind that doesn't rely on someone else. The kind that comes from knowing you're finally where you're supposed to be. Helen had once been my whole world, and when she betrayed me, it felt like that world had collapsed. But looking back, I realized something important. I had built that world around her. I had shaped my life to fit hers, made sacrifices, compromised pieces of myself to keep her happy. And in the end, none of it mattered. But now I was building something new, something just for me. Work was thriving. I had taken the promotion, and with it came a new office, a bigger paycheck, and a sense of accomplishment that was entirely my own. I no longer dreaded coming home to an empty apartment, because it wasn't empty anymore. It was mine. Every piece of furniture, every framed picture, Every little detail reflected me, not the ghost of a life I had lost. And then there was Emily. What had started as something casual had quietly evolved into something deeper. She never pressured me, never asked for more than I was ready to give. But somehow, she had become a constant in my life. We spent more time together than apart, and without even realizing it, I had started picturing her in my future. One evening, after a long day at work, I came home to find her sitting on my couch, flipping through a book she had left there the night before. She looked up and smiled, and just like that, the stress of the day melted away. I sat down beside her, pulling her close. "You know," I said, my voice thoughtful, "I never thought I'd be here again, with someone, feeling this." She turned to me, her expression soft. "And how do you feel?" I hesitated, searching for the right words. "Happy, safe, like I don't have to try so hard to be enough." She traced lazy circles on my arm. "That's because you are enough, Alex. You always were." I exhaled, feeling something settle inside me. She was right. I had spent so long trying to prove my worth to someone who never really valued me. But I didn't have to do that anymore. I had already won. That night, as we lay in bed, I realized something else. I wasn't just moving on. I was finally living. Months passed, and life settled into a rhythm. A good one. I had expected the scars of my past to haunt me forever, but time had a way of dulling even the sharpest wounds. I no longer woke up with the weight of betrayal pressing down on my chest. I no longer wondered what Helen was doing or if she regretted losing me. It didn't matter anymore. My life had moved forward, and she was nothing more than a closed chapter in a book I no longer wanted to read. Emily had become a steady presence in my life, but it wasn't just about her. For the first time in years, I had built a life that felt entirely my own. I had taken up new hobbies, boxing at the gym, weekend hiking trips, even a cooking class that I absolutely sucked at but found strangely therapeutic. My home felt like home, not just a place filled with memories of someone who had betrayed me. One evening, Ryan and I were sitting on my balcony, drinking beers and watching the city lights flicker in the distance. He leaned back in his chair, stretching his legs. "So," he said, "when are you going to put a ring on Emily's finger?" I nearly choked on my drink. "Jesus, Ryan, we're taking things slow." He smirked. Sure, but don't act like you haven't thought about it." I hadn't just thought about it. I had imagined it more times than I cared to admit. The idea of marriage had once felt like a prison sentence, a mistake I never wanted to repeat. But with Emily, it felt different. There was no fear, no sense of obligation, just the quiet certainty that she was it. "I don't know," I admitted. "I'm just enjoying where we are right now." Ryan nodded, taking a sip of his beer. "Good. Just don't let your past make you afraid of your future." His words stuck with me long after he left. A ghost from the past. A week later, I got an unexpected message. It was from Helen. I stared at my phone for a long time before opening it. "Helen, hey Alex, I know I'm probably the last person you want to hear from, but I just wanted to say I'm sorry for everything. I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but I needed to say it." I read the message twice, then set my phone down. It had taken her nearly a year to send those words. A year of silence, of living with the choices she had made. And now, finally, she was acknowledging the damage she had done. I thought about responding, about telling her that I had already forgiven her, not for her sake, but for my own, that I had let go of the anger a long time ago. But in the end, I just deleted the message. Some things didn't need a response. A new beginning. On a crisp autumn morning, Emily and I drove out to a quiet lake just outside the city. It had become our favorite place, a peaceful escape from everything. We sat on a wooden dock, our feet dangling over the water, watching the sunrise paint the sky in shades of pink and orange. She leaned her head on my shoulder. "You're quiet today," she murmured. I smiled, squeezing her hand. "Just thinking." "About what?" I exhaled, letting the cool air fill my lungs. "About how different life is now. How I never thought I'd be happy again. But I am." She lifted her head to look at me. "Good. she said softly. Because you deserve it. And for the first time in a long time, I truly believed that. I turned to her, brushing a strand of hair from her face. I think I love you, Emily. She smiled, her eyes shining. I think I love you too, Alex. And just like that, my story had a new beginning. A better one. One that was finally mine.